I think when we're trying to solve the biggest problems, I think the biggest thing that we struggle with, whether it's within our particular organization or even in a society, a community wide, is our culture. And because culture is this weird, interesting, nuanced thing. We hear it bantered around a lot, but culture is the way that we think, act, and interact with one another. And in a lot of times people will talk about culture in ways of like, oh, we need to create a culture, or we need to create a better culture, or something along those lines. And here's the crazy part. Whether they know it or not, everybody has a culture. Because you can't actually create one, weirdly enough. You can only be a culture. Right? Because it's the way that we think, it's the way that we act, and it's the way that we interact. That's what creates the culture. That is what is the culture. And so if we really want to affect change at a culture level, we've got to be able to affect change personally. There's got to be a personal transformation in the ways that we think, in the ways that we act, in the ways that we interact with one another. And the great thing is that there's ways that we can do that. And I know organizations are typically, they have heard about creating values, and okay, we need to have some values, and we're going to list these values and put them on our walls. And these are the values of our company or organization, and which is great. That's a great place to start, because value should be this defining space where it says, okay, based on these values, this is the framework that we're going to operate under, so that will help us understand what's the expectation. How are we supposed to think? How are we supposed to act? What's normal for interacting within this space? And those are great ways, but if it only lives on a conference room wall, then it doesn't really help to transform an individual or really affect the culture at large. And so sometimes there can be a disconnect because, okay, here's our values that are over here on the wall, and I know we have values somewhere, but whatever. And it's really getting them off the wall and into our hearts and into our minds. And that same thing is true for communities. And in this day and age, we have so much input from so many different places, which is fantastic. I love technology, and I love all of the input and resources that we have available at our fingertips. But within that, one of the things that has been lost is we don't all have shared definitions. We don't have shared definitions for what things mean. So even like the word integrity, there's lots of great definitions for integrity. And a lot of organizations would say, hey, we have integrity as one of our values. But how one organization defines integrity might be a little bit different than how another organization defines it. Neither one are right or wrong. They're just different. And so how we see that acted out in the thoughts and the interactions and what that looks like with employees can be different. And so one of the things that is helpful for organizations and communities as well is to be able to have understood values. So first, define what are those values that you want to be able to live out. So if everybody lived these values, like if they understood them and lived them for real, man, we would really have the culture that we want to be able to affect massive change, have the transformation in our communities and in our businesses that we're looking for. But to do that, we've got to start off with a shared understanding. This is what we mean by integrity, or this is what we mean by valuing every person. This is what we mean by excellence, whatever those kinds of things are. Say, hey, these other definitions can be great. There's nothing wrong with them, but we're all going to agree that when we talk about it in this context, this is our definition. And once we have that understanding of this is our definition of this is the value, then there's this, okay, now how do I apply that? What does that look like for me personally? Where are those challenges? Because it's always there. Like, oh, we have a value of excellence in our company, but man, today's just a hard day and I really just don't want to. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that has ever had that thought before, saying, oh, this is hard. And having that challenge where the value challenges who you are and how you make decisions. It could be that you have a high value for valuing every person and treating customers and employees with high value, that you want to be a very relational, customer-centric organization. And sometimes we're just irritated. And so that's a moment where that value, okay, we've got this value over here, but I have this tension point where the rubber meets the road, and oh, this person in front of me is driving me crazy. So how do I choose to act, interact, and what am I thinking? And that goes into that personal transformation where I've really got to have that value inside of me, that regardless of the behavior of the person on the other side of me, I'm choosing. I'm the one that's fully empowered to choose to still be respectful, still value them, regardless of how they are treating me or whatever nerves that they happen to be getting on at that particular time. So that's where we really start seeing massive culture shift. That's where we're able to see, from communities to companies, being able to shift and change their cultures. It starts with that understanding the values and people being able to live out those values, and they're being transformed in the way that they're thinking and the way they're acting and interacting with one another based on those values.